Yeah, let's get started. So, weeks ago, we had a note go out stating the problem with jazz at the Berklee College of Music is that they teach the most talented young musicians in America all these techniques to use polyrhythms and semitones and harmonic analysis, and to pay $50,000 a year, all to make music worse than the stuff made 70 years ago by borderline homeless heroin addicts. Bold words from Bold Vegetable that set the Substack jazz community ablaze. Good evening and welcome to the most critical debate of 2026. Tonight we'll be joining Russell Sprout and Jordan Call to answer the number one question on everyone's mind lately. Does jazz suck? And if it does suck, is it the fault of university jazz programs? Today, to double down on his statement, we have Russell Sprout. Russell Sprout is a cruciferous vegetable. He lives in Chicago with his wife and cat. He grew up in a musical family and played bass in school jazz bands, albeit without exhibiting much musical talent. His expertise in this area comes from having this exact argument with family members who are enthusiasts of the more modern style of jazz. Here to oppose him and defend university jazz programs is Jordan Call, a bipedal mammal who eats vegetables for breakfast, though admittedly only extremely occasionally. He briefly practiced law not because he liked it, but because the universe needed to make sure he was prepared for this very debate. He plays jazz semi professionally, produces music of various types, and is halfway through a master's program of music production at the implicit villain of this debate, Berkeley. I'm Clementine, your esteemed close and host and highly qualified moderator for this evening's bearded debate, coming to you live from San Francisco and selected for my extensive expertise in shouting over men while they fight. My qualifications in jazz include and are limited to going to a jazz club at least once and watching La La Land at least twice. Here's how tonight will unfold. We'll start with opening statements from each side. Russell will present his case that formal jazz programs diminish the art form, followed by Jordan defending the value of institutional jazz education. Next, we'll move into a back and forth discussion where both participants can directly engage with each other's arguments, challenge points, and develop their positions in real time. We'll then shift to rapid fire questions pulled directly from our audience submissions. After our esteemed debaters present their closing statements, we'll turn it over to the audience to vote for a winner. I'll be here to ensure that we keep tonight's events mostly civil. You guys both ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you.
All right. Let's start with Russell.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Clementine. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Jordan. Thank you to everyone watching for making this real. University programs in jazz have made jazz significantly worse. I wrote this proposition. I'm arguing in favor for it. So I have the responsibility and the privilege to explain what it means. In so doing, we'll define the parameters of this debate. First, let's talk about jazz. Jazz emerged in the early 1900s in Black communities in New Orleans having a unique mix of cultures, including different Black cultures, that combined in jazz to create a unique sound. It was very lively dancing music, and it quickly spread across the country. During the 1920s, it became the most popular genre of music in America and then the world, which was pretty crazy at the time. It was a humble genre. It made its way across the entire planet. Then it stayed the most popular genre of music in America for about 2 decades. This is the big band era, names like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Cab Calloway, until rock and roll emerged out of the blues in the late 40s and early 50s and displaced it as the most popular genre in America. Then we have a long period of it transitioning from a primarily dancing music to it being a listening genre. This is where you get Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, who kind of bridges these two eras. You see more experimentation, many more musicians with classical training, and a greater degree of complexity in the music. This is also around the time that university-level jazz education emerged, although it really took off in the late 60s and 70s. You can kind of guess why it took off then. The moral revolution in the United States in the 60s, civil rights, the notion that a Black art should be taken seriously at the university level. These programs have gone on to create something of a jazz boom. Jazz, as taught by these universities, produce a ton of jazz musicians who then, because there were never that many jobs in playing jazz, got employment as jazz teachers at other universities and then high schools and middle schools and began teaching it the same way they learned in college. As a result, there are lots and lots of jazz students, and these students have their own culture, including their own preferred music. There are bands that are cool to these students and essentially to no one else. Snarky Puppy, Jacob Collier, Wolfbeck, Sungazer, etc. These programs have made jazz worse. What do I mean by worse? I mean worse in an artistic sense, which is still very vague. What is the point of art? What is the point of anything? I don't have a good definition for this. I would say good art captures an essence of being that cannot be expressed any other way. Now I'll advance the core of my argument. Jazz, which began as very physical music, high in energy for dancing, has been made worse at every stage of its development because we have seen a move towards more abstraction. How could this be? When you listen to John Coltrane and you listen to Duke Ellington, isn't Coltrane so much more sophisticated? These are the heroin addicts that I referred to in my initial note. But you're only listening to them. In the heyday of jazz, the music was not the full extent of the art. You, the listener, contributed to the art. You would go to a club, you would mingle, you would drink, and you would dance all night long. You would add to the art by your own performance. That is the correct environment to listen to the kind of jazz being made in the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s, the heyday of jazz. Of course, when you strip all that away by sitting down and listening to it on a record, it sounds worse. You're missing half the art you would have contributed. You can still experience this art today. You can experience it with a ton of old people in rooms that smell like cigarettes, but you can still experience it. So rock and roll emerges, people start dancing to other music, tastes change, that's just how it goes. The remaining audience for jazz are people who like to sit down and listen to a record, and that influences the kind of jazz that succeeds in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I will admit these records sound great. If you want to sit down and listen to something, they're phenomenal, but you don't get the effervescence, the thing that live jazz captures with these records. You can't really dance to it. And the live performances all kind of exhibit that aspect of the experience. You mimic the behavior of listening to a record by sitting down, listening to the performance, clapping at the prescribed times. Now, here's where university programs start making things worse. As a student, you are told to look at this history and study it. Jordan, earlier today, published a very good 3,000 word long article before this debate that I have largely sidestepped because the point I'm making here is slightly different than the point I had made previously. And he points out repeatedly, because he interviewed a number of jazz students, that they all spend a lot of time studying quote unquote golden age jazz from the 30s to the 60s. Now, I would argue that already gets into pretty heady stuff, especially by the end of the 60s. That's besides the point. The point is that they study it as if it's all stuff for listening, as if the only participants in the music are the musicians. That's not the case. That was never the point of jazz when it was its most popular. And then because they're taught to do a mismatch of everything that came before, it fails to sound good on the record or get people moving. The music itself is blah, whatever. It's music best experienced as someone explaining the music to you. That's 21st century jazz experienced in its truest form, as somebody verbally explaining it to you. What the universities have done is they've taken once lively music, already declining in energy, admittedly, and let it bleed out entirely on the dissection table. Then they stitch the corpse back together and they say, this is what jazz is, this is how it should be, go spread this to the world, and it worked. That's why universities have made jazz worse.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sprout, for that wonderful introduction. Let me pass it over to Jordan. How would you like to start with your opening question?
Say that again?
With your opening statement?
Yes, I do wanna say to Pika that, yes, we both did spend way too much time preparing for this, and never underestimate the power of male insecurity, and fear of losing, in a public way. So, okay, so Russell has I actually really appreciate that little overview of the history of jazz, very fun to hear, and I think he's a sneaky, actually, jazz appreciator, which doesn't matter. But, I agree with a lot of his vibes. I think that his feeling that jazz is, um, a different thing than it used to be, and that he doesn't like that thing quite as much is a perfectly fair opinion to have, and if you share that opinion, I think that is a perfectly fine opinion to have. Now, the way that I'm going to win this debate, because I think he and I actually probably agree about a lot of things, but the only way that I'm gonna be able to win this is to be clear about the actual proposition at hand. It's not about vibes. It's not about whether jazz music is good. It's the question that Russell posed is, has jazz music, I forgot to start my timer here. Has jazz music gotten worse and is it universities' fault? And either one of those, if not true, the argument fails, and I think both fail. So the first question is jazz worse? And uh, when Russell talks about music that doesn't move you, your body or your heart, um, I want to assign a label to this, which I will call ego jazz. This is jazz that's heady and intellectual, and just for people who like jazz. Um, I agree that bad taste is bad, and I agree that there is jazz that is done in bad taste. Uh, this isn't new. Back in the bebop days, you had Clifford Brown playing Cherokee at 340 BPM. It just sounds like an absolute mess. And you've got all kinds of people in history making virtuosic music, including today. Um, but the other thing is that this ego jazz is just a small part of jazz. He's taking a slice that he particularly dislikes and then applying it, extrapolating it to the rest of jazz as a field, which is frankly not fair. And I will say that I play gypsy jazz. You can see my guitar a little bit back there. And every week there's a jazz jam, and every week there are people that go and play swing, or that do swing dancing to our music. We still play music that's meant to make you dance. Now, I may not count because I don't have millions of followers, but in the piece that I published today, you can see that a lot of danceable jazz and a lot of great music that I would still call jazz is still coming out today. So to say that somehow jazz now is bad, really what he wants to say, or what he means to say, is that some jazz is bad, and that's always been true, and that's true of every genre. I also don't think it's fair to compare the legends of history, the Charlie Parkers, to 18-year-olds who are just trying to impress people and gain TikTok followers for what I think are obvious reasons. The more important part here is that even if Russell's right that jazz is worse, which I think it's not, he is attributing it to the wrong cause. It's not the fault of university programs. Now, did they arise at a similar time? Okay, if you want to pinpoint the decline at that point, um, I don't think that's right. But and you can also say, well, I look at these programs and I see all of these musicians who are doing this kind of music that I don't like. It must be that it's caused. I actually think he has the causation exactly backwards. University jazz programs are trying to teach musicality and the fundamentals, and music that moves your heart and your soul and your body. But this drive towards virtuosity and towards ego jazz, this has a lot more to do with the social media landscape that rewards spectacle. It has a lot more to do with young students being young and immature and wanting to compete with each other and insecure. And you have global entertainment industries where you can see the best of the best of the best, which makes it seem like everyone's playing just the most complicated things possible. Um, so ultimately, I don't think that this is the fault of university programs. I think there's selection effects. People that are into this, they're going to go into a jazz program, of course, because what else are they going to do? Finally, I think the jazz school provides a lot of really wonderful benefits. I can see that there are downsides. Maybe there's some gentrification of the form. I understand some of these plausible counter arguments, but they connect talented students who might otherwise not have accessibility to a scene, and help connect them with mentors and other interested students. And they are helping keep a genre alive that, frankly, is well past its prime, and in many ways, or arguably at least. And so I think that a net negative, certainly not. I think that university jazz programs are nothing but a huge win for jazz as a culture and a art form.
All right. Thank you guys both so much for those opening statements. I'm going to open up the floor now for both of you to have a back and forth discussion with each other. You can challenge each other's points from your opening statements. You can introduce some new questions as well. But I'd like to start with Russell. Do you have anything that you would like to challenge on Jordan's opening statement?
Well, yes, I'd like to challenge his characterization of my argument. My argument really has less to do with what jazz is being produced and more with what jazz is being consumed. The core of my argument is that university jazz programs have hurt the taste of the average jazz listener. Jordan is correct. There is this other market for jazz out there, but the vanguard of the people who spend their time listening to jazz, like people who would say that jazz is their favorite genre of music, are people in jazz programs. They are jazz students. This is the subculture that has embraced jazz in the 21st century. And the music that they listen to is not good. Now, on the other side, he brought up gypsy jazz in the style of Django Reinhardt, which I do appreciate myself. Um, and there is sort of this bifurcation where, like, it's easy to listen to Django Reinhardt. It's very relaxing. It's incredibly pleasant music. You see this with the trend of embracing Japanese jazz, which is also very much along these lines. It's pleasant, it's listenable, it can kind of fade into the background. Versus you have on the other side this interest in extremely hyperdense, beyond the pale of what any average listener would listen to jazz. And I would, the easier stuff, the stuff that is pleasant, I would say that has not gotten worse. That has, it's pretty much stayed the same. It's still good. And the stuff that the university kids listen to, which is ever more popular, not just university kids, but I'm talking like high school and middle school, people who have an identity as a person who likes jazz. That stuff is is worse, and it's getting worse. And that is why universities have made jazz worse. They have made that genre within jazz more popular and more dominant.
Perfect. Jordan, do you want to go through some of that response a little bit?
Sure.
Reframing kind of like what Russell's kind of main argument was on why university jazz programs make things worse potentially.
I'm still just I'm missing the mechanism by which the university programs are causing this. I agree that the vanguard, as he says, which is like ultimately I think an arbitrary collection of people that whose taste he just dislikes, which is fine. It doesn't represent the majority of jazz listeners. It maybe represents people he knows that really like jazz, or maybe there's a lot of that kind of people who are at jazz school, which of course, right? Like every genre has an inside baseball wing. There's always going to be like the high art people in any genre. I mean, even in like pop, I think that you have people who are gonna play the status games of like, well, oh, you like this pop artist, I only like this pop artist, and are snobby and gatekeepy, and like that's everywhere, and it's annoying, and I completely agree that it's annoying. I don't see the connection of how the universities are causing this, and not just maybe being a place where those people congregate. I actually think that maybe universities are helping, like, uh, offset this to some extent, because, like, when I talked to my friend Isaac, who's doing a jazz guitar program right now, he says that, like, 90% of what is taught is not this, like, annoying avant-garde, high art, ego jazz stuff. Um, you get some exposure to it, but, like, consider the counterfactual. Like, wouldn't it be weird if you were like, "No, we don't teach anything after 1970 because it's just too weird at that point," you know? It's like, no, it's like this is there's always weird stuff. So I'm just curious, like, I don't see the causal connection here. I feel like I agree on the vibe. I completely disagree on the attribution.
I That's a very fair point, and I am going to explain. And I'm going to explain in a way that also addresses a question Ian Jobling is asking in the chat,
Mm,
which
I
is
was just looking at that.
defining.
That's great because I wanted to bring that up as well of how exactly are we defining what is like worse jazz versus better jazz?
It is a subjective call. I would say that it's about what is good music. It's about what is good art, and it's about a subjective assessment of whether or not a piece of art has that ephemeral quality that moves a person. Um, whether it can capture something about the shared human experience that we are all going through that cannot be captured in any other way. Um,
Can I
and
can
that's
I
Go ahead.
well, I just wanna drop my thoughts about the definition piece just really
Mhm.
briefly, which are I have explicitly bracketed out trying to argue the merits of certain kind of music because ultimately that is just taste and like that would be a fun debate. It's the rock rot and rule thing if you've ever heard of that, the Sharpling like there's this long story a book about a parody book that's like I've categorized every kind of rock band as whether they suck or whether they're great. And it's just silly. So it's like we could do that and that would be a fun debate. That's just not the proposition here. The proposition is, are universities causally making jazz worse? And I'm just stipulating, for the purposes of that argument, that there is some bad jazz and it is around, like you can find it around the university program. I don't really see a need to argue otherwise.
My point is that they don't teach students to chase that quality in art and in the music that they create. They do not teach students to try and move an audience. They teach students to appreciate the technical aspects of the music over that. In my mind, any medium of art is a means to an end. You are trying to communicate something. And the medium itself, people say the medium is the message. I disagree. The medium itself is secondary to it, or you pick a medium based on what you're trying to say. Um, but in these programs, and because this is necessary to develop a mastery of an instrument, it is focus on here are the techniques, here are the compositional elements you will encounter, and here is the kind of stuff that you would appreciate. But they don't teach students to make art that moves people. They kind of actively discourage it. And I think that's a shame. And I think it's a shame that that model of teaching music where it is about the technical mastery has trickled down from these universities into high schools and middle schools and wherever you learn music. People start learning music at a very young age. They get inculcated with this. They get brought up to aspire to this as an ideal. And it to me, this is a deprivation.
I I think that would be bad if it were what was happening. I just think on the facts here, you're wrong. I think my computer went to sleep. I think on the facts you're wrong. You didn't go to jazz school. I didn't go to jazz school. I'm closer to that scene, I think. But I talked to people because I was curious. Like I didn't know when I called my friends. Like, are they going to say, "Oh yeah, it's like it's high art school." Like if you're not playing, you know, a million miles a million notes a second, then, you're not gonna pass. But I think you underestimate the extent to which most people who listen to jazz are deeply or who play jazz are deeply, deeply moved by it. And their goal, their North Star is to learn to move people in the way that they've been moved. And the professors, I think maybe not without exception, but I think by and large, the professors see their goal as cultivating artists, not technicians.
Hmm.
It's not like a classical performance. Well, that's actually a little bit. That is actually a suspect thing as well, because I think that technique informs expression. In fact, I think a wise man once said, "With but a very rare exception, an artist's technique informs expression," which just kidding. I made that up. But I feel like to deny the impact of technique is to be kind of ignorant about how art is made. And like usually what happens is you build up these chops and it's kind of a preparation period, and then you mature and you're able to kind of turn them into, from grape juice to wine kind of, right? And you see that over and over and over. But like musicians love music and they want to move people, and like some people get really caught up in the virtuosity and kind of the status of being like the best, just like people get caught up in the politics of these different scenes and games. But by and large, I think that the professors, like, you might have theory classes, but this is just trying to put colors on your palette so that you know how to move people and you know how to create your own expressions. And like a huge part of jazz school is just taking private instruction from a master. And like they're not like what's annoying to me actually is usually when I talk to these like old head jazz masters, I want technical instruction, like how do I actually get better at the guitar? And they just want to be mystics. They just want to be like, man, when you learn to play the notes that you don't hear, that's when you really ascend. And you're like, okay, all right, great. Like I'll go meditate on a mountain and hopefully I'll get better at the guitar and make better music. So I think that's really what's happening in jazz school for the most part. Now, there's a lot of ego jazz, but again, I think that's more social media pressures and just like young kids trying to show off. It's not that's not what the old heads are trying to get them to do.
So it does seem like we're kind of defining good jazz as music that can move people. And Russell, you're kind of coming from the assumption that jazz that's being taught in universities is overly technical and that is kind of losing the art form. But it seems like that's potentially not the case.
Well, I would argue, and this is to respond to Jordan's point here in two ways, that he, in part, by pursuing this program, has adopted an idea that is fundamentally incorrect. He talked about how he was talking to these old masters who he gets the ability to talk to through the program, and I do think that's a positive. Um, about trying to improve, and they're giving him abstract advice when he wants something more concrete, something that he can do. I think they're giving him the advice that he needs. You're not going to improve, and this is certainly how I feel about my own musicianship. Not that I've really excelled in that area, um, but you improve by playing, by feeling, by experimenting on your own and, with others and experiencing. It is that is how you, as insofar as you can do it, capture the ephemeral feeling that makes great music great. And this can apply to other forms of art. It makes great writing great. It makes great painting great. It is through trial and error and practice, and in the case of music, playing to a crowd and seeing what moves people, uh, that you can cultivate this ephemeral quality that I can't really describe. Um, and the great shame of these university programs is they inculcate the opposite idea that, if you have more colors of paint, if you know more techniques, you can capture more ideas. If you could only get better, your art would also improve. And that's just not the case. Art is independent of, you know, not entirely independent, but it's largely independent of your ability at a given area. It's harder than that in many ways. It's more difficult. It's about trying to the way that you capture something itself is difficult to capture. And it's not just through knowing how to do things. There's more to it than that.
Do we buy this chat? No, just kidding. I think you've moved from like a shaky premise to a way shakier premise. Like
Okay.
I think anybody who I don't believe that you believe this about, for instance, like writing, like any great artist. Okay, let me tell a quick aside. there's something called outsider music, which if you've never heard of is really, really interesting. It's music made by people who are literal non-musicians, like not just like they've dabbled, but like they don't know how to hold a guitar the right way. They don't. And it's very interesting, but it's not moving almost ever. And it's not sustainably interesting either. In almost every case, when you have somebody who's really moving you, they have put in thousands and thousands and thousands of hours into honing their ear and their technique and like practice, like what you said, like saying what they want to say. I think that you kind of are promoting like a legend here of like the unschooled genius, which like happens occasionally, but I know some, and those guys practice more than anyone I know. Like it's like craft is so important, and I think it's a little strange to say otherwise because I see in your writing craft. Like it's like a debate. Like if I just pulled someone in from the street and was like, "Go with your heart," like they're not going to do very well compared to somebody who prepares and who studies and who, now, if you want to be a great artist, like I say, you've got to go from the grape juice to the wine. You've got to like mature and ascend and like find your own voice. But like almost any great artist is going to tell you that for the first chunk of their upbringing musically or artistically or whatever, they were just like copying what came before to try to learn how do they do this. I mean, I know writers who say, take a page of writing you admire and type it over and over and over so you get these rhythms in your fingers. So yeah, like there are musicians who never get beyond derivative, but the ones who do invariably start there. They're not just kind of like, spring forth out of Zeus's head like Athena or whatever. So yeah, I'm not super moved by that line of approach, that line of argument.
I guess my point isn't that technique doesn't matter, like, at all, point blank period. It's that the prioritization of technique over other aspects of music, which is what these programs inculcated. I saw it with my own eyes. I went through many of these programs in elementary school and middle school and high school, and this is a problem with music education in general, where you teach kids that the point of art is this technical mastery. And I do think I would agree with Jordan here. You need to have technical mastery to be able to do most things. I will say that there are some cases where, the untrained genius does exist very, very, very rarely. But yes, in 99.99999% of cases, you're going to need some sort of training and expertise to be able to create great art. I will agree with that. However, what these programs do is they don't make it clear and they don't make it apparent to the young musician that that is important. What they do is they say, you must be able to accomplish this, and that is the goal, and stop. And, like, force yourself at it in a way that for many young musicians is not fun and is not enjoyable and does not provide them with a path to enjoying the act of creating art. So yes, I would agree, you need technique. I would agree with that. It is the prioritization of technique beyond all other things that goes all the way up to the university level. Because it is competitive, right?
Mhm.
These are selective programs. These are programs where, you can only get into them if you are so good, and you can only get into the good ensembles and the good performances and interact with the best people if you are so good. There's a strong competitive element that is based entirely around technique. And that is unfortunate because it teaches people in these programs to prioritize technique over artistry.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that I'm interested to hear that you have feel like you were taught that way. I think that, that's not really been my experience, but I I'm not doubting that it's kind of was yours. I agree that I think great musicians understand that technique isn't the priority. It's a prerequisite or yeah, prerequisite maybe
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. Um, and maybe, maybe students lack maybe the teachers know that, but the students kind of lack the perspective and they just get the message like, I need to be faster fingers and I need to, I think that's normal. That's a normal kind of thing for a kid to kind of flatten a message that in that way. Um,
All right, I
I
am actually gonna cut
oh,
our back and forth section. We're gonna start moving into the rapid fire questions just for the sake of time. So for here, I'm gonna start asking you guys questions. There are some that are specific to both of you, and just try to answer these as quickly as you can with kind of the first things that you can think of. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, first question is going to be for Russell. What non-university educated jazz musicians would you recommend folks listen to?
Oh man, I like actually go back and listen to Duke Ellington. It's a cliche answer, but this guy started learning piano at 19 years old. It's insane that he can put out the kind of things that he did and make the kind of music that shook the world, rocked the Cotton Club for years. It's he's you look back and it's like, well, it's big band. It's not the most artist forward stuff. I think his story is particularly interesting, and his music does still hold up. Especially you go back into the back catalog, he's really messing with it.
Perfect. All right. And then for Jordan, what university educated jazz musicians would you recommend for folks to listen to?
yeah, for sure. I want to co-sign Russell's endorsement of the Sir Duke. I wrote a little piece earlier, not that little, but I mentioned some people. I love Rita Paez. I'm gonna stick with people that are like new and young and just out of jazz school and maybe arguably in that, maybe flirting with some of the ego jazz stuff. There's Rita Paez is a Spanish artist that I think writes just beautiful music. I like Ohad Niceberg is like a guitarist who I think is unreal and swings harder than like anybody I've ever heard. Leve, if you like pop stuff and kind of more on the accessible side. And then like Anomaly is maybe the closest to the ego jazz thing that I think is perfectly tasteful. He's like a Quebecois guy who does like hip hop production, incredibly virtuoso piano, but like very emotionally I think it's accessible and like emotionally moving. So I would check out all those folks.
Perfect. All right. And then this next question is for both of you. I'll give you guys both a minute or so to answer each. So it seems like there is a dearth of heroin powered jazz centric community spaces that would give folks access to recording equipment and music industry executive exposure that would actually give us the creme de la creme of talent. While expensive jazz programs might be under delivering, like Russell is saying, how else would today's jazz musicians hone their skill and make a living in today's decidedly more kind of highbrow view of jazz?
Well, there's the jokey answer, which is give them all heroin. Um,
Love that.
I in a serious way, I think there is in many admittedly kind of hippy dippy music education circles a movement towards you start kids by play based music education. You let them mess around, you show them a few things, you let them mess around with that. I you know I think that makes sense for the younger kids, especially. And that is the sort of thing that, like, yeah, it can inculcate an appreciation for music, an appreciation for the act of creating art and trying to create that effervescent quality. And then they get older, you give them the techniques and teach them the way. But like you start them with this is what music can be. It can be fun. Go out and learn that way. I think that's the serious answer. And I'm also thinking to myself that sometimes I make posts that are too good and they go too far.
It was a banger, dude. It was funny. I appreciated it. Um, so I love the play-based music thing, and I've never heard of that actually, but that's what I've been doing with my oldest daughter, and my other kids, but mostly her because she's kind of getting to that age. And I've I've kind of told my wife, she's like, we should get her in lessons. I'm like, no, 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 not yet. Like I want the fire to burn on its own accord for a while. And lately
Hmm.
she's been trying to sing harmony along with like songs that we listen to, which at home, which is really cool to see.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I'm so about that. Um, I, uh, I disagree with the premise. So I record jazz right here. This is my studio and I produce it and I release it on Spotify. It has never been easier to get your music out. What's super, super hard now is that there's no filtering mechanism other than virality. So it's hard to find it. There's a lot of noise. So it's the onus is kind of on you to go out and find the great music that you like. Like there's a kid here that is a friend of mine where I live, Sam Farthing, who's a gypsy jazz genius. He's like a prodigy, and he's released a couple of albums that we've like worked on and stuff. And like he's not that well known yet. He's big in the gypsy jazz scene, and he's kind of his star is rising. But it's like if you wouldn't have heard of him, find those people because they're making incredible music.
Perfect. And then I actually want to bring up a kind of a challenge to your response, Russell, coming from the audience, which you mentioned that we should kind of let them experiment and then teach them the way. Joshua Call is asking, teach them the way how exactly, if not for a university education?
The way you learned before there were university education. You get in it, and you get somebody who plays it, who knows what they're doing, and you have that one-on-one interaction that shows people how to play the music. That's how you learn music in most genres. That's how jazz was largely taught and experienced beforehand, insofar as it was, or it was just like kids going up and playing the worst solo you've ever heard in your life. And that's where they started, and they moved from there. But the answer is you learn from the people who play it, and quite often they're willing to teach.
Can I
Mhm.
respond quickly to
Definitely.
that? I'm glad this came up. We didn't get to it in
Mhm.
the debate itself because the like what's the counterfactual of like without this what?
Mm.
Um in a world so I'm going to call Russell's way here like the organic scene development, right? In that world, like that's still a way that people learn jazz. That's how my friend Sam learned jazz. He didn't go to jazz school. The problem is that scenes are hard to find, especially in an art form that's past its prime and that's not pop anymore. Um, so like a lot of people just wouldn't have access in their critical formative period to these kinds of people, but for them being aggregated at the university level. And ideally, the university education just matches you with that person and helps you get that experience that you wouldn't otherwise have. So, also, even without the jazz university thing, you're still going to have the problems that you have now of like some people are going to be all about the technique. Some people are going to be in it for the social media likes. Some people are going to be, like you're still going to get those people like they're just out there and like there are still going to be mentors that are too technique focused and you know what I mean? So like I just don't think aggregating them and making them accessible to more people is what's creating a new problem.
I would respond to that, but Stephen Lewis already has in the chat, and he is completely right that the jazz scenes that exist in the way are not independent of the university. It's deeply entwined. There's no part of the jazz world that hasn't been touched by the university system.
I mean, gypsy jazz, my genre is not that way. I mean, we have some kids that are doing it, but like my friend Isaac, he comes to these jazz jams. He's not studying gypsy jazz. He's just kind of there to learn about gypsy jazz because it still is a very scene-based jazz and it's European. Like those guys aren't going to jazz school for the most part. They're just like, I mean, literal like Sinti people in France that are like keeping this tradition alive and like people go and fly to France and learn it from them and it's great. It's awesome. I just think that the university level is additive, not subtractive. Like it's optional. It's not no one's it's not like you nobody and here's the other thing too. Nobody cares if you went to jazz school. In the real world, nobody cares. Like you play with these cats. I'm going to do the lingo thing. It's annoying. You play with these cats and nobody's asking, "Yo, where'd you go to school?" They just care how well you play and if you're moving them. So like you play with people and you can't tell who went to jazz school necessarily. Some did, some didn't. Some of the best ones didn't. some of the best ones did.
I think that's a kind of a good segue to our next question, which is something that you guys also touched on earlier in your discussion is in the punk scene, my friends and I talk about thinking music versus feeling music. Historically, I would say jazz fits into both. Do you think the current understanding of jazz as primarily a thinking genre has sprouted from the university programs or from other sociopolitical factors?
Oh, sorry, say the last thing again. I was reading Felipe's message, chuckling to myself.
uh, do you think that the current understanding of jazz as primarily a thinking genre has sprouted from university programs or from other sociopolitical factors?
I I'm very excited to take this one, but if do you want the last word on it, Russell, or do you want the first word?
You go ahead, Jordan.
Okay, something else that I really wanted to get to but didn't is this idea of the life cycle of a genre, which is kind of a pet theory. I'm sure I'm reinventing the wheel and that some much smarter people than me have already laid this out, but the way a genre happens is like it's born and it has to have strict rules because it's like this is a new thing and this is what defines it. Then there's the people that break those rules in interesting ways to keep it fresh and they're innovators, right? But then you continue to break the rules and eventually it's kind of unrecognizable and you either split off into a new genre or the genre kind of dies or it becomes kind of a museum genre where it's like this is how we used to do it, we follow the old rules, but like there's no more cachet in being a rule breaker. You have to find a new thing. So like rock is old and there's still people that do rock, but like the energy for the last 10 or 20 years has been in hip hop where it was like it was a really defined and then and then you get like Tupac, and then you get Jay-Z, and then you get Kanye, and then you get Kendrick, and like at some point it's going to kind of run out of the finite resources. So I I think that what's happened to jazz is not because of the universities. It's just an older format. It's an older genre where a lot of rules have been broken along the way. And it's kind of, you either have to decide, am I going to be like crazy avant garde, no rules, tennis without a net, or am I going to play the museum stuff? And like that just happens eventually to stuff. And like jazz just, it's not the energy in pop music moved from jazz to rock and then from rock to hip hop and then from hip hop to who knows what but uh, it's the fact that it's not a pop music anymore isn't an indictment of the form. It just kind of got old. It phased out a little bit, and I love jazz, but I'll admit that it's kind of an old man.
Perfect. Russell, what do you think?
My
I will respond to that by saying that the universities have gone beyond the normal cycle. They have introduced something that is not thinking music or feeling music, or not thinking music in the way that we're normally accustomed to. What they've introduced is meta thinking music. They have introduced music where the enjoyment comes from thinking about the thought behind the music. And it's not just you sit, you experience, you think. It's you sit, you experience, you read that experience through very likely your own jazz education in one form or another. And you understand, like, oh, here they're they're quoting Modest Mussorgsky. That's weird. And you gain enjoyment based off of that and like the meta contextual understanding. I think that music is worse. I think it sounds worse. I think that level of enjoyment is less enjoyable than either the thinking or feeling modes of genres. Which I would agree the transition from jazz being primarily, it's fun, it's pop, it's for getting up and dancing. It's movement into a genre where people sit and listen to it. That's organic, that's natural. The universities didn't cause that. It's the emergence of the thinking about thinking jazz that I think the universities have caused and that I especially dislike.
Perfect. And then going more into the way that jazz has changed and become more modern, you guys did touch a little bit on foreign jazz earlier, but we do have a question on what do you guys think about the recent trendiness of Japanese jazz or just foreign jazz more generally, and what it says about the modern audience's relation to jazz as the art as an art form?
You want me to say something? I
I'll,
don't know very much about Japanese jazz. I think that, and I know, like, a
Or even
little.
maybe like Leve or like kind of like the more like popular forms of jazz.
So what I'd say is, to me, what this brings home again is that jazz is so much more multifaceted than the kind of cherry pick that I think Russell wants to do of like the hyper intellectual jazz that exists and that I also dislike for the most part. Um, uh, I think that jazz can be something that makes you dance. It can be something that, like, I listen to Lewis Cole because it makes my heart beat faster, you know? And it's some of it's weird and technical, but mostly it just like his musical philosophy is, quote, "full blast." And I love that. I love it, you know? But then, sometimes you wanna think, sometimes you wanna dance, sometimes you want to, just have a vibe. And I think that today music is becoming increasing, or a lot more people are viewing music as a vibe, rather than, dance inspiration or,
Mhm.
whatever. Like, you can create an AI generated playlist that will just play you the mood you want infinitely, and people love these. Like, they listen to them for hours and hours, and they're huge on Spotify, millions and millions of streams, because people just want like a vibe. And I think that, like, Japanese and Asian culture and anime and all of this stuff, it brings a cool vibe. And I think that to some extent, it's not surprising to me that that a lot of people are really interested in like the accoutrement of like what's coming with this music, what is it saying about me, what's the vibe. And truth be told, I think that's always been true, but it seems especially uh acute kind of now.
Perfect. Russell, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would, if I can make a Freudian analogy, I would say that, Japanese jazz, you can tell I was really annoying in college. Uh, I would say that, Japanese jazz is the super ego in a way. It is the music that people pull out when they want to feel like they're listening to jazz, but they're not super into it. I think the music itself is fine. It's, like, pretty good. But its rise in popularity is, like Jordan is saying, it's a vibe. It's people, want to listen to it because it's Japanese jazz, like, the name Japanese jazz, saying, "I listen to Japanese jazz." God, that feels great. Um,
I should try that.
ja
I
and
love Japanese jazz. Well, that does feel
Exactly.
good.
Yeah, it feels phenomenal. And to tie it back to the, very negative point that I'm making, it's also the case that many young jazz musicians are making this overly complicated, music because it feeds the image of who they want to be. They're making it because they want to be among their peers the person who can play microtones in 17/8 time, and be able to handle that. I think, Japanese jazz really has nothing to do with university jazz, but its popularity is motivated by the same thing that makes the genre of music that both Jordan and I have been critical of not good.
Perfect. All right. I want to go ahead and move into your closing statements now. So we'll go ahead and get started with Jordan, and then we'll listen to the closing from Russell.
Great. I barely have a closing. What's my time limit on this? Like 1 minute?
You have 3 minutes each,
3 minutes?
but you can
Okay.
take
Well,
the
it
time you
might as
need.
well be 1 minute. So I just think that I'm not necessarily the best debater, but I do think I am good at picking propositions that I can win on. And I think this is a proposition that I win because I don't think he's carried the burden on either issue. I don't think that jazz is worse right now. I think that there's some jazz that's bad, is about as much as we've really proven. And like, I think that if it feels like there's not as much good jazz now and there aren't as many legends, okay, well, give it 100 years. You're comparing the greatest people that have ever, that we know, and from the history of the genre, to like 20-year-old students just graduated. So give it time and like we'll see. But I don't think that it's fair to say that jazz as a whole is somehow worse because there exists kind of a high art wing or an avant-garde or an inside baseball wing of it. Um, I also feel quite confident in the correctness of my proposition that the university is not the thing that's causing this. What the university is doing is it's aggregating people, both mentors and mentees, who love this music and bringing them together and sharing notes and trying to create the best musicians possible. And not just focusing on technique, but not neglecting it either, because it's an important part. And jazz is, I mean, life cycle of a genre. Jazz got to a point where there's a lot of technique to it, right? It's not an easy thing to just be an outsider and try to play. And that's, if you don't like that genre, that's fine, but that's one of the features of the genre. But that's not because of universities. That's just how it is. And the universities, they are cognizant of that and they address that. And frankly, you have students who are young and immature and interested in status games and wanting to show off, and they want to be have social media followers and they want to be dazzling, and you've got them competing with each other, and that's going to happen no matter what. And I'll tell you, in the jazz scenes that I'm in, you've got kids that went to jazz school and that didn't go to jazz school, and old guys that did and didn't, and they're all competing and trying to show who's the best in the pecking order. And it's an inevitable part of music. Even things like pop, which if you think doesn't have like status games, I don't know what to tell you. Um, Ultimately, the universities are additive. They're not necessary. They're not sufficient to make you a great musician, but they almost always help. And I think rarely really meaningfully hurt, whatever their flaws might be. And they're entirely optional. There still exist organic scenes. So ultimately, I think they do a lot more good than harm for the jazz world, because jazz is a little bit of an old man, and it's kept it alive, kept a twinkle in its eye, and kept the young people interested, and given them and the old mentors a place to go and to share their love for this music. So for that reason, I don't think that university jazz programs have made jazz worse.
Perfect. Thanks. And then Russell, you want to take us home?
Absolutely. I'm going to make an appeal to your heart. Do you know people who are in these programs, you, the audience, not Jordan specifically, because he has elaborated on that in great detail? Have you met these students? Have you heard the music that they listen to? Is it good? Is the music that they pull up and try to show you like it's the best thing in the world? Do you enjoy that music? Do you appreciate it? Do you like it? My original post struck a nerve because for so many people, the answer is yes, they do know these students. Jazz education is very widespread. And the answer is no. This music does not move people. It does not reach to the heart. It does not reach into the mind. It reaches into the level beyond the mind. And that is the fault of the universities.
All right. Thank you guys both so much. For our audience members, I'm going to drop a link to our final form in the chat right now, and you can go ahead and vote for who you think won this debate. Do you think that university programs have made jazz worse? Or do you think that they are just that jazz is just following the natural lifestyle of music, and there's going to be worse jazz and better jazz regardless? And while we have the audience voting, we do actually have a couple more silly questions for you guys from our audience questions. So the first one I have for you both is jazz or is it not is jazz pretentious or is it not? Sorry, it's written in a very confusing way.
Is jazz
I think he
pretentious
said,
or not?
Is
"Is
jazz
jazz is
pretentious?
or is jazz ain't pretentious?" Is
Yes, yeah. He said, "Is jazz is or is jazz
Look,
ain't
if we're
pretentious?"
not
And
gonna
I am
meme
already
post,
tongue-tied enough, so
yeah, I mean, yeah, some of it is. I mean, I get it. It's like it's not for everybody, and it's definitely to some extent a musician's art form. Like, it's not the proposition, but yeah, like I don't blame anyone that if someone says I don't like jazz, I'm like, okay, like that's the least surprising or bothersome thing to me ever. But I love it, and a lot of people love it.
I mean,
It
perfect.
that
moves them critically. It does move their heart.
Does okay. Well, is this yeah. I mean, part of the there's a joy to being pretentious, isn't there? This is now I've completely
I mean,
gone
this is
gratuitous.
Substack, right?
Yeah, this is we're all pretentious here, right, guys? Right, right, right. We all read doorstop Russian novels here. We're all extra cool. We place great value on pretension. I think there's a very trolley argument that pretension is good if done well. The question is how well you do it.
The Russell Sprout story.
Perfect. And then the last question is not jazz related at all. It is from the lovely Pikachu, which is Smarty Son or Put Me in a Movie Daughter. What would you guys prefer?
Smarty son. That's
Oh,
so
put me in a movie, daughter.
what? Wait, what? Okay, change the
Are
proposition.
you
I
saying
move that
what?
we change the proposition.
So look,
Seconded, anyone?
look.
No, it's definitely Put Me in a Movie Daughter. I want her
Yeah,
to
see,
like
it
work
would agree.
once, make a
Yeah,
ton
there
of
we go.
movie from a like money from a great movie, and then
Yeah,
set us up
yeah.
for
No,
life. I'm exploiting my child.
nobody put me in a movie daughters into movies critically.
You know what they have that Smarty Sons don't? Friends.
Very true.
They have
I think we can all agree smarty daughter put me in a movie son is the preferable
Well, it seems
Mm.
like Jordan Call has lost all debates today.
it's okay. I knew what this was when I picked it up.
All right. We actually only have a couple responses in, and you guys very genuinely are tied as winners. So I guess we will continue debating this and wonder forever if university programs have made jazz worse.
We will never ever know. Hey, massive thank you to Jordan and Clementine for doing this. It's been a blast.
Thank you all so much. It was so
Thank
nice
you,
to
man.
see everyone.
It was so fun. Thank you guys. This has been fun. And thanks everybody that like joined and the comments. I read all the comments and I'm just like honestly, it warms my heart that A, 3 people would talk on a video call about jazz, and B, that some people would watch that. It
Yeah.
makes me feel really good. I love jazz. So thanks everybody for joining.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night.